What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We welcome back from his voyage, his odyssey, Phil Perry. How you doing, fella?
Doing great. Feeling good. Plenty to talk about. So we're in good shape here. Happy to be home.
Folks, do you know I can tell because I've worked with Phil for going on 12 years when he wants to get right after it. One of the nicest guys you could ever work with. Going to be a lifelong friend for me. But I know when he wants to get after it and get moving. And that is a definite indication by tone right there of let's get after it and let's get moving. Phil, listen to these numbers. Red zone percentage among teams finishing drives in the red zone with touchdowns. The Patriots are 32nd. We know that. 37.84% of the time they go inside the 20 and score a touchdown. This is what's eye-opening. The next worst team at 31, they're 45%. Then the Texans, that's the Colts. Then the Texans, 46.1, Ravens, 48, Raiders, 48. The Patriots are fully 10% worse than everybody else. Third down, they're 29th in the league at 34.09. Fourth down, 30th in the league, 33.33. And goal-to-go situations, you get it inside the 10, first down, what do you got? 57% of the time you're going to punch it in with a touchdown. Offensive touchdowns, they're tied for 28th in the NFL with 24. Phil, the question we lead into on my handy-dandy budget is, did Bill overestimate Matt Patricia and himself? Did he underestimate Josh McDaniels and what Tom Brady wrought over the course of the time they were here? Did he underestimate the rest of the league and their competency relative to the Patriots? Why did he think it would be easy or not this hard?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think he probably assumed that there would be growing pains here, right? With coaches in different positions, a new system, a new language. They tried to turn themselves from the Earhart-Perkins offense that they were for a long, long time. And while holding on to some of those same concepts, because a lot of concepts are kind of universal in football, they shifted. They tried to become a West Coast offense, essentially, which is what the rest of the league is doing. And so Bill Belichick, I'm sure, sees value in that. But I also am sure he assumed it would be hard, but maybe not this hard, Tom. I've got a couple other numbers here if you're hot on the numbers right now. In the fourth quarter, the Patriots are 32nd in the NFL in offensive success rate. And they also, in the final 2 minutes of the second quarter and the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, they have a top 5, which is not a good thing in this category. They have a top 5 sack rate in those situations. So situational football, it's all they work on, Tom, which has to make this especially frustrating for Bill Belichick. If you go to a Patriots practice during training camp, you will see, potentially, depending on how many days you go and when you're there, but you will see the team periods dominated by either third down or red zone or both or 2-minute. And Bill Belichick will be out there just calling out random situations, end of game situations, end of half situations. They work on it constantly. And so for them to be so bad in some of these situations we're talking about, third down, red zone, end of game, it's just, it baffles the mind.
It does. And to me, we had a spirited couple of conversations. Your side made a lot of sense. Mine, I was going by the breadcrumbs as to whether or not Bill viewed 2022 as a rebuild. And I contended that it had all the elements. If you're going to try and change the offense and you're not going to have a real offensive coordinator, you're girding yourself to spend a ton in free agency next year. It had the elements of a team that didn't think it was going to compete for a championship. And your contention, if I got it right, was basically, hey, they had that 2 years ago, Tom. You're not going to spend the second year with Mac Jones and all these guys making all this money just, dinking around trying to figure out what works. I mean, I'm not trying to take a victory lap. Believe me, I'm not. But God, this is more rebuild. Again, I don't think that he anticipated going down to a sub 500 team, which they quite likely will be in a rebuild. He underestimated or overestimated everything.
I still don't think that was the intention. I go back to those reasons that you just rattled off from my point of view, but I also look at what the owner said. The owner said he wanted to contend this year. He was asked point blank this year, because it did. You're right. In March, when we knew Matt Patricia and Joe Judge would have massive roles on the offensive staff, we looked at it and said, okay, this might take some time. But when he came out and said the things that he said to us in Palm Beach, where he was unhappy about not winning a playoff game in some time, it clicked in my brain. I'm sitting there listening to him, microphone in his face. I'm saying, is he talking about right now? So I asked him, and he said yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the owner of the team. If he's not cool with a rebuild year, then it seems like it's probably not something that the organization at large would be cool with. And for them to be looking like a rebuilding team this year, to me, is what makes it a failure of a season to this point.
What's wild, Phil, is I just don't think I anticipated the Patriots getting worse as the season went along. I thought the rough spot would be in the beginning of the year, and that even if the wins didn't come late, you'd see a better product, an improving product. And we're not seeing that. And I think a lot of that's tied to the dynamics that are going on within the team right now. Players, after the Buffalo game, he did an outstanding job reporting on it as they headed to Arizona, felt as if, okay, we've been let down. We're going to take more on ourselves. We're going to expect more. And we're going to try and do more. And in doing so, I think they put more pressure on themselves. And I think that was illustrated by Mac Jones' performance on Sunday, maybe pressing and trying to do too much, and also by his histrionics when they were inside the 5 in trying to create urgency. And then it just looked like an absolute clown show. And then also that final play. That's players going rogue and trying to make a play when they know better. Phil, go ahead. You're itching. Go.
So do you think there's something going on subconsciously there where, and I wouldn't necessarily argue, because who knows what's going on in the backs of their minds, but two of the best players on the Patriots saying, hey, we're actually kind of sniffing the end zone here. I know the play was a draw play, but we're actually much closer than I thought we'd be here. Let's see if we could keep this thing going. And then, one lateral leads to another, because once Ramondre Stevenson laterals it to Jacoby Myers, and now to Myers' credit, he said, I'm smart enough to know, even when he throws that to me, that I should just go down and live to see overtime. But it's like the party's on at that point. Now,
Yep.
now we're really trying something crazy. And you think that because the offense has been so bad, that maybe in the backs of their minds, they're saying, if we don't get it here, we may not get it. So here goes nothing.
I think there's a chipping away of trust and belief in the sidelines that would allow the Patriots and some players to make decisions and do things on the field that show a disregard for what the sidelines might say to them. That's the outgrowth. That wouldn't have happened last year with this team. Wouldn't have happened in 2020 with this team. That wouldn't have been something that they tried to do. There's desperation that exists now. We don't want to go to overtime. We're going to try and make a play here. Jacoby Myers would not have done that last year or the year before. And I'm not saying that he's acting out, but I'm saying this is the outgrowth of the winnowing away of trust that happens where players will act out, where players will do things that don't mesh with what the general overall philosophy of the team is. And this is because I believe psychologically, I mean, when we talk about it, we sit there at early edition and go, well, if Mac doesn't show respect for the sideline or goes rogue, what can then happen? And Matt Castle or Ted Johnson will say, well, it's against the tenets of what will happen. It's a crumbling of authority and a chain of command. And we're sitting there as non-players talking about post-game live now when we talked about it. And we're like, well, who cares? You got to do what you got to do to make the team win. This is kind of the outgrowth, I think, as to what can happen when the players start to feel that they have been let down, where they go rogue.
It's an interesting point. I'm sort of torn on this, because on the one hand, as a player, you should know, as Myers said, that what the situation calls for there. But on the other, again, we mentioned this right after the game, we are now, because of everything we've seen this season, conditioned as media people and fans to turn to the coaches and say, well, what could they have done more of? What would a more experienced offensive coach do in that situation? Would there have been a reminder to go down, to take care of the football? And I do come back to a saying, Tom, because again, I'm inclined, because the players themselves are telling us this, that they're putting it on themselves. So I'm inclined to say, you're a grown up, you're a smart player. Both those guys, you should know to go down. But Bill Belichick has also told us over the course of time, you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen,
Mm-hmm.
as well as players win games, coaches lose them. So I still don't know. Is it a player going rogue? Is it a player making a decision, or is it a player who hasn't been coached hard enough in those situations to understand what it is he's supposed to do there to help them win that game?
I think it's a player who has seen in the last 3 weeks a growing discontent with the offensive teammates that he has, showing a lack of respect for authority, and then a player in a moment, Ramondre Stevenson and Jacoby Myers, saying we're going to do what we think is best for us right now because we're not afraid of what's going to happen when we go to the sidelines. What's the worst that can happen? We're trying to make a play. And if there was no fallout for Mac screaming at the sidelines, whether he had a right to or not, what was the fallout going to be for these guys? I think that Bill, understanding the players' frustration, let Mac get as demonstrative as he got. And I think the horse is out of the barn. Someone has to chase that thing down and put a saddle back on it and get it ready again. And I think that we saw an indication that that might be happening with Bill Belichick, where enough was enough in the post game. And let's listen to some of Bill's commentary on the mistakes that he saw, because this was more of a, hey, we all got to do a better job. And it was less of that and more of a, hey, those guys, they were mistakes, man. Here's Bill.
Yeah, we need to try to eliminate all the mistakes we made. All of us. Yep. We just collectively made too many mistakes and, gave up some big plays.
He had an opening.
We made a mistake on, the play didn't work. Made a mistake on play. We have to eliminate those mistakes and we just gave up some critical big plays. So we need to eliminate those. It's obviously a mistake on that play too. Okay.
So Phil, I think that what I'm perceiving is an undercurrent of Bill finger wagging. See, this is on you guys too. You want to yell at me, you want to yell at Matt, you want to blame us. You guys are perfect out there. And it's not that overt. You have to really read between the lines to see it, which I've become kind of expert on in the time I've covered the team.
Yeah, I took the mistake commentary as we all made mistakes, coaches and players, and just sort of being in that mode. But you might be right. I mean, the comment that to me stands out as to pointing out the limitations of his players was about the Hail Mary at the end of the game, where
can't throw it that far. Let's hear that.
Can't throw it that far. That felt like a shot without, I don't know. Did Bill Belichick intend it that way? He followed up. He was asked about it again the next day, and he maybe dialed it back a little bit, saying, for us, for that play, that just was too far. So it sort of became less of we can't throw it that far and more of like the entire offensive unit would be able to execute something so far away from the goal line. Mm-hmm. So maybe that factors in offensive line or it factors in, protection in that situation. I don't know. But that you may be onto something there where, there's an annoyance on the coaching staff's part and Bill Belichick's part when it comes to the players and the discontent that they've shown. Okay, it's all well and good if you want to do that, if you're playing well, but if you're not, I'm gonna let you know.
Personally, I mean, that's a personal reference to a limitation that I'm sure Mac Jones has plenty of insecurities about. You might not have enough arm, Mac. Yeah, he didn't have enough arm in the wake of a loss, and he would have been 1,000,000% correct in what Phil is contending. You think the Patriots are going to protect for 4 seconds for guys to get all the way down the field? And I know they can get down there, but do you think that they're going to hold up? Do you think that maybe Max Crosby might not come off the edge, strip sack Mac Jones, and then have a chance to run in, and we never get that very eventful play? That's probably what Bill was thinking about. Or do we need to have one of those circus plays where somebody picks it off and they're running the other way, and then we get a knee blasted? I'll never forget Stephen Neal doing that in 2004 in a halftime Hail Mary. And I know that Bill thinks about it because he brought it up like 5 years later. Halftime Hail Mary, picked off, running it back, and Steve Neal tore his ACL. So, but he could have gone in either of those directions. And instead, he went in he didn't have enough arm. That is unmistakable as to what direction that was in. And to me, that stands as, you know what, Mac? I've given you a lot of leeway. I told everybody how much you improved drastically from last year when you were already pretty good. And last week, you spent the week pissing and moaning at my sideline and my decision. I was raised in Annapolis, the Naval Academy. And that's not the way you're supposed to do stuff. And I had to answer questions all week about your insubordination. So you better have a good game when you go out there instead of going 5 for 15 in the first half and 5 for 16 in the second half. And again, bitching at the sidelines. Again, the horse is out of the barn. It needs to be tracked down, saddled, and brought back. Give it some oats, give it an apple, whatever it takes. But right now, it's sideways. It's gone worse than expected. But the Patriots' record still doesn't indicate, Phil, how bad it's been. They actually control their own destiny. Can they get the saddle on the horse and actually save face in the last 3 games in this stretch from hell?
No, nope. And I think it's why, I love the analogy with the horse, because I think it's out of the barn, and I think you're trying to track that thing down on foot, and I don't think it's coming back, and it gets back to the discussion that we've had on buy-in since training camp. This is why it matters. And this is why that decision to put those coaches in those spots was as big a risk as it was. Because you could say, well, we should all be on board, and we should, even though we're 15 weeks into the season, we're one of the worst offenses in the NFL. We should be able to have our wits about us, and we should all be able to get along here. But that's just not accounting for the human element and the buy-in that you could lose by making some outside the box decisions that don't work. And Bill Belichick had to have known that was at play, and he had to have known what a risk it was. He could not have known that it would have gone this poorly, because now you're dealing with, especially when we're talking about that last play, if that's in fact what was happening, and I guess we'll never know exactly, but
sure,
if that's what was happening, that is a result of losing buy-in, and it may have been lost a long time ago. I think the horse officially left the barn during that Buffalo game. Tom, I'm not sure it's coming back. I think it's going to be really hard for it to come back, given the final 3 opponents that you're facing, even though you control your
adversity. Yeah, the piles of adversity you're going to see in the next 3 weeks, which is a shame, because defensively, I would say the Patriots are a top 10 defense. I think that's, we can stat it up all we want, but they're a top 10 defense in terms of pass rush, coverage, run stopping. Josh Jacobs had some moments, but they're a good defense. They are a playoff level defense, and it's been pissed away. They are, they're not a playoff level special teams unit. Playoff level kicker, playoff level return guy, other than that. But the point is, you have a playoff level team, but you have a sub-playoff level coaching staff, which has led to a sub-playoff level offensive product. And that, to me, is what's fascinating. Mac Jones talked about what the mental approach will be in the last few weeks.
I feel like we have a very mature group of people that we're all playing for each other, which is the most important part, and obviously to win. But it's hard. You want to look at the winning part of it, but you also have to look at the process part of it too. So you got to stick to the process, and the wins and everything will come. And that's great advice from Slater, is just come together. There's a lot of things that we could pull apart from, but we're not going to do that. We're going to come together and finish as strong as we can, and that starts with this week.
So saying the right things. But Phil, you're right. The Buffalo game, when the Patriots decided on 4th and 7 after Mac picked up 8 to punt the ball in the fourth quarter, that was the first. There have been a few of them, but that was the, what are we doing here? And then we saw it as the game went along, and Mac closed it with, we'll got to go down fighting, feeling as if the Patriots his sideline doesn't fight. I mean, that's against the Bills. We didn't fight. Jesus. That's potent words from the young man out of Jacksonville, McCorkle. I do want to make one thing clear, too. I'm a little all over the place. I'm not saying that Ramondre Stevenson and Jacoby Myers got together in the huddle and said, hey, screw the sideline. If we get a chance, let's start flipping the ball all over the place. I'm
Right.
just saying that in the moment, there is a little valve in your brain that says, what happens if I do this? Fight or flight. They decided to fight because they were not afraid of what would happen to them on the sidelines. What will Bill say? What will Bill say? That's everything. That's the predication of everything the Patriots players do. What will Bill say? What does Bill want? It's the undercurrent. And in that instance, the what did Bill say was, I don't care, from the two best players. And that's what it's been from Mac Jones. What will Bill say if I act out and flip my arms around? I don't care. I have to do it. That to me is what I'm saying. It's not a conscious moment to moment FU. It's that I'm going to take this risk, even though he won't like it.
Well, and again, I think, this is the situation has been brought upon Bill himself, and it started months ago. But the reason why you let some of that stuff go for Mac Jones maybe is because you understand, if you're Bill Belichick, man, he's in not only is he in a tough spot. Not only do I understand why he's frustrated, because I'm frustrated too, but he has the backing of the entire locker room. Everybody loves him. He's a captain. He's constantly being praised, so much so that even after some of those outbursts in Arizona, our most stoic and heady and experienced leader, Matthew Slater, says, in fact, that they would like for him to use his voice even more. So this guy is fully empowered by the 60-ish players, including the practice squad, that reside in that locker room. And so if I take him to task, what am I going to do? Bench him and lose everybody else? We're still in this thing here. So I'll let that slide. And then it's a slippery slope. And again, that's why to lose any amount of buy-in early in the season, the way that I think he did, ends up coming home to roost at, this point in the season here.
It's a great point. It'd be one thing if Mac was acting out like maybe Kendrick Bourne was in training camp and irritating Bill, and you throw him off the field. Kendrick Bourne didn't have a good camp. Everybody understands where Mac is. Mac is a sympathetic figure to his teammates. They probably have been thinking to themselves, I know that other guys in that quarterback room thought to themselves early in the year, this is outrageous what they've put in front of him, and felt that he had been done dirty. So that being the case, the sympathy rides with Mac Jones, even though their sensibilities might be offended if you're Devin McCourty or Matt Slater or anybody else who's a veteran player with the reasonable, heightened respect you have for Bill Belichick above anybody else. You still understand why the guy's pissed off. Somebody does have to put his arm around him at some point, whether it be Matt or Devin McCourty, and say, okay, we're in diminishing returns now, bud. Okay, we got it. I understand you're pissed. I understand this has been a wasted season. I understand you're getting all the shit that is being heaped on you because of the decisions Bill made, but we got to at least show up to the funeral with dignity and our ties straight.
Does it serve a long-term purpose, Tom, for Mac Jones? Like, if all this stuff isn't happening, do the powers that be, let's just call it, let's just say ownership, like to Robert and Jonathan Kraft, are they looking at this differently by the end of the season? Or because of the emoting that we're seeing in game, does an alarm bell go off in their owner's box that says, okay, well, we just can't have this by season's end? Because, if somehow they end up 8-9 and it's essentially a 500 team, and it's the first year of the new staff and everybody's, loving each other and happy and hugging, all day long on the sidelines, maybe that tells one story. But we've certainly begun a different story towards season's end here. And I wonder if it is somehow playing a part in whatever decisions get made this offseason.
You're putting ownership in a bad situation, whether ownership knows it or not, because we understand Robert Kraft's continual affinity for quarterbacks, whoever they are, whether it be Cam Newton or Jimmy Garoppolo or Tom Brady or Drew Bledsoe or now Mac Jones. Robert doesn't mind being a shoulder to cry on, somebody to go get a pat on the back from or a pat on the ass if necessary. And if you're going to get that, if you're seeking that with a reason. You're explaining something went wrong for me this year, Robert. So even if you're not directly going up the back stairs, as used to be referenced with Drew Bledsoe, to Robert Kraft, as you see your latest fifth son, the quarterback Mac Jones, sad on the field, if you have empathy for him because of it, you say it's because of the decisions that Bill made. So you're basically, when you emote like that, when you bail on the coaching, as Mac kind of has done, you're setting up a dynamic between the owner and the head coach by saying this isn't working. It would be like, one of us going to our station general manager instead of our direct boss and saying, yeah, I'm really not happy with stuff and the way it's going. But don't worry about it. I'll soldier through. Not that we're Mac Jones or the fifth son of our station general manager, but you get what I'm saying. You're creating a dynamic when you're Mac Jones for ownership to have to address something with the head coach as if they didn't already know that they had to. It's just an added log on the fire.
Right. Well, I guess that's the thing. You are ensuring that they know that it has to be addressed by handling it the way you've handled it. You're leaving no room for doubt.
Right.
And that might be a good thing. It's something that needs to be addressed, and it's something that
it does.
People around the league are seeing, and they're very, I've talked to head coaches, I've talked to front office people over the course of the last few weeks just to get a sense for how they feel about how things have gone. And it hasn't changed from where they thought it would be when I was talking to a lot of those same people all the way back at the combine. And we talked about it on this podcast at the time, where the league at large is flabbergasted by the decisions to have these guys where they are. And now the reactions you get are a shrug of the shoulders, and you could see this coming from a mile away.
Yep.
The Patriots and Bill Belichick were really, it seems like, the only ones who couldn't.
And that to me is what's interesting is, how does Bill react to the dynamic that Mac is creating? And I think that, hey, he doesn't have enough arm is the first indication of that, even though he tried to put that toothpaste back in the tube. Okay, you know what? It gave you a lot of rope, gave you a lot of leeway, but you're starting to piss me off, buddy. You're starting to make me look bad. You're starting to make my coaches look bad. And it's all fine that Nick Saban loved you, but you're starting to piss me off. Cut the shit. Right?
Definitely. I mean, I wonder if, by season's end, are we talking about, and you've talked very openly about how you don't think Bill Belichick is going to be elsewhere in 2023. You think as it stands right now, he's going to be the coach in the next year, correct?
Yeah, my understanding is that the Patriots were not going to make any decisions until the end of the season. All the things that had gone on, Buffalo or Miami, or the decision to go with Matt, none of that stuff was going to impact things drastically. Now, I haven't really circled up since the Raiders game, but I just can't imagine, from all the work that I've done and conversations I've had over the years, that the Patriots would ever want that quote unquote blood on their hands of relieving Bill Belichick of his duties. They're going to press him for a pragmatic and useful solution to what's gone on this year. And I believe Bill will provide it. But I think he's going to be, absolutely, if he wants to, given the opportunity to fix it.
Do you think that fixing it in his mind might mean moving on from Mac Jones? And I'll tell you why I even bring it up. I don't think that's a fix. I think there's an easier fix in terms of tweaking your coaching staff. But it has been so dysfunctional, Tom, and the emotional nature of their relationship this last month or so, it can't continue on like this. And
no, there's a lot of repairing. There's going to be a lot of repairing, and there's going to be a lot of interpersonal personality and agitation and trust issues that have to be repaired. That doesn't have anything to do with arm slot or footwork or play design. You get somebody who got let down by his head coach, and now the player's done enough to explain how let down he is that the head coach is going to be pissed off and wondering, do I want to work with this prick or not?
And I think a lot of us haven't even really considered that yet because he's a first-round quarterback. He's shown he can play. A lot of us believe that he's not the primary issue here.
Right.
And maybe if you put him in a different situation, you get a much different result. But Bill Belichick, generally speaking, I know we just got finished talking about how he's maybe had to let some of this stuff slide because of Max standing in the locker room. But does that extend into the offseason? Does that just go on in perpetuity? Or at some point, are you still Bill Belichick who makes those hard decisions? And as soon as somebody does something that you don't like, you can find a way forward without them. I have started to consider that over the course of the last few days.
Yeah, me too.
Is this something that Bill wants to continue into 2020?
Yeah, I mean, do you draft Caleb or 2024? Do you draft Caleb Williams? I know he might not be sitting there, but I love that guy. He's everything that Mac isn't in terms of size, power, and running ability. Whatever, it's a different story. Do you look for an upgrade at backup? I mean, look, Zappy's Zappy, and I understand the elation that he fired up, but he's not a 17-game starter. So I think that it's going to be very interesting to watch the quarterback room in 2023 and the decisions made. Who is going to be the third quarterback in there? Because it ain't going to be just Zappy and Mackey. And Brian Hoyer, I'm imagining, after the bell ringing he took and the difficulty he had, that I understand, since the concussion that he suffered against Green Bay, it might be over there. So we did a lot here, Phil. We got to get to the game on Thursday when Matt's in. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be a fun game. Let's do that when he comes back. That's a good team over there in Cincinnati.
A lot of food for thought. A lot of food for thought. Folks, we had a toot situation the other day on the podcast. We edited it out. If anyone would like to just give us feedback, at Tommy Curran on Twitter as to whether or not you'd like to have that audio released, we can look into that prior to your Christmas. I just didn't think that Monday was the day to do it. There was a lot going on, and people were pretty bummed out. They didn't need gas on the pod, but it was funnier than you would have imagined. Right?
Didn't feel like the right timing for a two-piece?
No. Toot sweet. All right. That's another pod in the books. Goodbye.